Hello, everybody. I see Jamie, Kevin, Tyler. Thank you guys for making it. If you're here for the webinar, Why is everybody talking about mindset? You have made it to the right place. This is a free webinar put on by the B2B Writing Institute, where we help people learn how to write and sell really excellent business-to-business marketing content. I'm the founder, Sarah Griesenbach, and I've been freelancing in the B2B space since about 2013. Now, the best metaphor I could think of for mindset, to describe mindset, is like waking up one day and realizing you've been walking around with toilet paper stuck to your feet for just years. Because as it turns out, just by being human, no matter what your experience has been, just by being human, there are these thought patterns and beliefs and limitations that we carry with us that aren't true. So we're making decisions, we're holding ourselves back, we're taking what looks like the safe path as if it's our choice, when in reality, we're just working out these patterns that we're living without knowing it. So today, we've gathered 4 people who introduce some of the things your brain is doing, and you're going to decide if you want to let your brain keep doing that. And if you don't, we're going to have ideas for how to knock yourself out of those patterns and actually achieve all the stuff that you know you're capable of. So these are some of the best teachers in mindset, psychology, in the business space. These are 4 teachers who hold nothing back when they're serving. So they are some of the most generous people I've ever met. So we're going to get right to it. Welcome. This is Ed Gandia. And I'll share some of Ed links in his podcast, but Ed is a business teacher and mentor for just anybody who's happy with their writing career is how it feels. So he's an expert, especially at taking intermediate writers into that place where you can blow out your business, making more money with less time and better clients. Did I get it right? Like those are the 3.
Yeah, that's close. Yeah.
Everybody wants
Earn
that.
more in less time. Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
Ed also hosts the High Income Business Writing podcast, and I'll share a link to that. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Exciting.
Yes, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Cool. And we opted because you've done so much teaching and basically your brain is so valuable. We opted to just go for a Q&A. So I have a series of questions that I shared. And the first one, I was wondering, could you tell us the least woo-woo way that you define mindset for people who are really new to this?
Yeah, I'm a very practical guy. So I try to strike a good balance between the woo-woo, which I love, and then, okay, how do I make that actionable? And I don't know, to me, mindset, I just want a clear definition because it can feel very abstract. And to me, it's all about how you interpret and talk to yourself about what's happened in your past, what's happening now, and what could happen in the future, meaning possibilities, future events, et cetera. To me, it's really that simple. It's that conversation, the interpretation and the conversation that you're having internally.
And I feel like already we've done a little matrix layer of the world, because what we're saying is that what's happened in the past and what's happening now and will happen in the future, none of that is the truth, because it's all being interpreted by you as you go. So
exactly.
Like you can change how you're thinking about these things. And that's very powerful. Like when you first really get that.
It is. I think it's pretty amazing that you can go from feeling really down. And sometimes how you get that sinking feeling, I don't know why, because you forgot, because you're talking at 100 miles an hour and there's something you said to yourself brought you down, but then that conversation kept going. And then you don't know what triggered it, but you stopped yourself and just thought about something amazing that's going to happen or that could happen. And like that, your state changes. I think it's pretty amazing. And then you're right. You step outside of yourself and go to other people around me. They didn't see this crash that just happened and then getting myself back up. To them, like they were doing their own thing. So we think that the world is mirroring what's happening to us, but it's really not. It's up here.
Yeah, that hits close to home.
Yeah, all of us.
So I wonder maybe what got you more interested in mindsets. Was there a particular moment or challenge in your career where you started thinking about the psychological side of things in performance?
Yeah, so I was fortunate in that I came from corporate sales. So that's my first job out of college, 20 something years ago, 25, 27, I don't know, in which I didn't want to do. Like I was a finance major. I said the last thing I want to do is be in sales, which was interesting because I like looking back, that made no sense. But when you're selling in a big part of your income is tied to your performance. And not just that, but your ability to remain in that job is directly tied to something so visible as your numbers. You're really out there. You have to make it happen. There's no sweeping things under the rug. You can't just pretend that you're working. Is that you get it done or not? And that's a very scary place to be at first until you realize how empowering it is. So very early on, I recognized that I had to feed my mind certain food so that I could perform as best as I could. Now, being on the road for many of those years, I listened to cassette tapes and from a very early age, Nightingale Conant and Earl Nightingale stuff played a huge role in shaping my beliefs, my understanding of how this stuff works. And I've always been a student of this. So it came naturally for me to just want to absorb and understand as much of this as possible. But I turned my car into basically a university on wheels is how I refer to it. And so, yeah, it was early on. And that was an advantage, I think, when I went out on my own, because obviously here I am again. I have to make it happen. It's just me. There's no hiding. There's not pretending that I'm working. I'm either landing work or I'm not landing work.
Yeah. I'm embarrassed to say I've never heard of Earl Nightingale, and now I've pulled that up to follow up with, because I thought you were going to say Zig Ziglar, but that's really cool. Is there a starting book you'd recommend for that?
Yeah, so it wasn't a book. It's an interesting story, and I'll just give you the quick version. He gave a talk to a group of insurance salespeople back in the 50s, I believe, that was so powerful that they begged him to record it. So he went into a studio and actually recorded a record album of this talk.
Fantastic.
And I have one of the original audio versions of that. And it's just so powerful because it was a different time, which is neat just to see, wow, like these are principles that never change. And it triggers something in my mind because those memories from early in, my early days when those things made a big difference. Now I think I'm jaded, but back then these are revolutionary concepts for me. Yeah. So he was great. And by the way, the record there's a title to it and I'll send it to you when I remember.
Awesome. Yeah. I Googled a bunch of that. So I've got some good stuff to follow up with.
Yes.
And I love the way you put it that it either happens or it doesn't. And at first that's terrifying because it's a very 0 or 1 mathematical thing, but then you realize that you can do it and you get all the benefit from it. So Could you speak a little more about the upside of that, like how to lean into that?
So meaning the fact that you have that power and you can make it happen yourself.
Yeah. So it feels like a full-time job might be safe because you can slide by sometimes. But when you're on your own, that safety drops, but now the world is open to you.
I think many of us really need to start thinking about that a little differently. Again, mindset. I started realizing that no matter what, whether I succeeded as a freelancer or I failed, nothing bad was going to come out of this because I would come out the other end stronger, better, smarter, more resilient, grittier. And those are universal qualities that will apply and will help you in anything you do in life. So I think whether you're well into this or not, or you're at the early stages, I would encourage everyone to start thinking of it that way. This might be a temporary journey. It might be a permanent one. It might be a really long-term one, but either way, look at it as an opportunity to really grow and improve yourself because those skills are transferable to whatever we end up doing down the line. And I know if I were an employer or hiring manager, I would love to work with someone who's been through that, regardless of what the job was, than someone who's always been shielded by the safety, if we can even say that anymore, of traditional employment. One of the bad things about traditional employment is it creates this mindset of, I picture a desk with an in basket and an out basket. The work comes into the in basket, you process it, you put it in your out basket at the end of the day. And when you're freelancing, like you got to go find the work to get into the in basket. Then you got to do a good job of processing it efficiently. And you can't take your time because you're not getting paid by the hour. And then you got to put it out there and then you got to do it all over again. And it's a hunting mindset that's very different from most traditional jobs. And it takes people a while to get used to that. But you need to be aware of the fact that you need to get good at that. You're no longer at your desk waiting for the work to come in. You got to go and find the work. And then everything in that process needs to be as efficient and as effective as possible.
And I'd layer onto that, that's where all of the value comes. And that's where all of the autonomy and freedom comes, because you own that whole process. So if you're more comfortable being in the full-time role, like there's just trade-offs that you're making, and you can fix it to suit like how you want to live. So that's my favorite part, is you have the freedom to do either. That takes me right to my next question, which is the common mindset issues around when you first start charging for work. So shifting from checking your inbox to making it flow into your inbox, what are some other things that you see people struggle with when they first get into freelancing?
There's a huge problem with imposter syndrome. And by the way, guys, just know that never goes away. Most of us struggle with that. I struggle with it. Believe it or not, I was a little nervous coming into this call. So don't think that, oh, but he's been doing this for long. No, man, I still get nervous. I just read somewhere that Henry Fonda, even in his mid 70s, would throw up right before every performance in Broadway.
Wow.
And you need to understand that it is there. You just need to acknowledge it, and you need to know how to manage it. So this imposter syndrome usually shows up as, who do I think I am to do this, or to think that I can accomplish X? I need to check every box before I feel qualified to go after that client. And by the way, please don't take this the wrong way. That is a bigger problem among women than among men. There's an article in Harvard Business Review a few years ago that showed, it was a study they did. Men will go after something and they feel about 60% qualified to do. Women need to feel 100% qualified. Just that awareness should really jolt you. It's, wow, why is that? And I don't know, you can unpack that yourself, but it's understanding that we're usually playing it safe. We feel like imposters, and we harbor so many self-limiting beliefs. So the way you deal with that stuff is not to try to delete it out of your hard drive. It's just acknowledge that it's there, and then grow. And I can talk a little bit about a model that's helped me a lot. Are you okay if I share my screen?
Please do.
Okay. So I was thinking about describing that conceptually, but I think it's more powerful if I show it to you like this. So it's a cycle that we all go through. And at some point, early on, this is too thick. We all start with some kind of potential. We're going to go after something, embark on a certain journey, go about our week, whatever. We have a certain degree of acknowledged potential. Okay. And that amount of potential is what dictates what actions we take. So we take these actions, and then we get some results. And that result fuels our belief. This is happening all day, every day. Okay. We start with a certain potential. We take actions based on that. We get a result that feeds our belief, which of course then feeds our potential. One of the most important things that I've learned is that there are two places where you can alter the cycle, because unfortunately we all get stuck here, and the cycle doesn't grow. You don't grow as a person. There are two places where you can change that. One is you can start paying closer attention to your results and acknowledging, hey, that went really well. That client was happy with my draft. They mentioned that. Typically we blow that off, or we don't acknowledge it like we should. Take the time to recognize these results, because that's going to feed your belief, which is going to increase your potential. So that's a great one. And the second one is obvious, is action, is doing things that scare you, not create panic, but scare you a little bit. Keep pushing yourself. One thing I tell coaching clients when we first start working together, and I realize that their fees are way lower than they could be, is to what next opportunity, quote 20% higher than you normally would. And if they're completely freaked out by that, I said, okay, fine, 10%, but quote higher, significantly higher. In an overwhelming number of cases, they get a yes with no question. Okay. So that is an example of changing your action. That's going to give you the result. Wow. They said yes to 20% higher. I can't believe it. That's going to change your belief system. You create a new normal. that changes and augments your potential. So we have to break the cycle. And these are the two great and best entry points. Change the actions, acknowledge your results. Does that make sense?
Yes, I've been busy in the chat saying how I do this because it's so powerful to, with your original definition, saying how you think about what's happened and what's happening and what will happen. You can think about positive things and you can keep a client happy folder to see that you're getting good feedback and that you're just increasing the ratio of good news to bad news in your feedback loop. Just finding different ways to do that is incredible.
Yes, agreed.
Perfect. So you mentioned coaching clients and maybe the 20% increase was too much. So you go down to 10%. When people move into that intermediate and advanced level, how do you coach them through charging more than they're used to, especially when they might have undervalued themselves and there's a lot more value that they haven't stepped into or owned yet?
Yeah, there are a lot of ways. So that's a big, important area. I'll give you a couple of ideas. One is to take a look at your peers who are at your level and get a better idea of what they're charging. I think there's nothing more motivating for a lot of people than to see how much they're undercharging by and realize, wow, okay, this is, I could do much better. If Susie is getting that, I'm at least as experienced as she is. The other thing is to recognize that it's going to be scary. That's totally normal. In fact, if it's not scary, if fear is not creeping up, you're not pushing yourself enough. Okay. So use that as a litmus test and just understand that it's, you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. For years, and even to this day, that's my natural state. I want to seek comfort. And that's most of us. That is the worst thing you could do. That's going to put you on a downward cycle very quickly. So you just have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's going to be every week for the rest of your life. I hate to say it. If you're an ambitious person, and ambitious, by the way, it doesn't have to do with income. It's whatever you want to accomplish, seek discomfort. I'm not talking about the kind of discomfort that's going to paralyze you, but some discomfort is healthy. That's how we grow.
Yeah. And I'm just interrupting that cycle of being uncomfortable is a bad thing and means I need to stop what I'm doing, and see that at least in this line of work that we've chosen, being uncomfortable can often be a sign you're doing the right thing and you're working on the right skill. I think that was a switch to make.
Absolutely.
Cool. And so maybe trying to stay close to the question, but I do want to modify it. Like, are there ways to practice getting comfortable with being uncomfortable? I think just that sense of throwing yourself off a cliff. I know a lot of us are going to hesitate to do that because it still feels like you're actually going to die. So this goes with the question of how do you mentally prepare for engaging with and working with executives and people who might feel like they're at a higher level than you? But what are some ways people can prepare to be in uncomfortable situations?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. Some things that I do often that work really well for me is one, again, I look at past results. I look at kudos I've gotten. You mentioned the file. I keep a file of kudos, feedback that I've gotten, things that have made me emotional. It was so powerful. We tend to forget those because we focus more on negativity than on positivity. So that's when you need them. Pull those out. The second thing I do, especially if I'm going to meet with a client, this is a new client in this company that I never thought I'd even have the opportunity to pitch or talk to, is I have to do a little bit of visualization ahead of time and visualize how the call is going to go. And just imagine that they're actually thrilled to be talking with me. I also imagine the person I'm going to be meeting, and I look them up to see on LinkedIn what they look like and everything, as a little kid. We put these people on a pedestal and make them so scary. I pretend and I imagine them as little kids. I know this sounds totally ridiculous, but
I love it.
Little kids who are afraid and insecure and don't know much. And I'm not saying that I treat them that way, but I minimize their power. And then what I said earlier, just remember and remind yourself that everyone is insecure. Okay. They might be, and usually are, hiding that. I told you I was a little nervous coming into this call. I don't mind admitting it. Henry Fonda was scared to death before every performance. It's 75. This is like an award-winning actor. You'd think he'd be like, oh, this is nothing. Okay. So just recognize that they're insecure, they're nervous, they're under pressure. You think you're under pressure? They're under pressure to get the stuff done by the right person with the lowest risk. They don't want to take a chance on someone who's going to screw this up. So they are under pressure and you're going to come in and save the day. So I have that internal discussion. Oftentimes it requires that I sit on my reading chair, close my eyes, visualize all this, and just once I start the call, I realize it's no problem. It's really the anticipation that's an issue.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that reminds me of the first time I was following Ash Amberjay, and the way she opened client calls as a copywriter. Usually we go in there and we're like, I'm so glad I could meet with you. Thank you so much for your time. And she explained that she opened calls by saying, I'm so glad I could find the time to meet with you today. And just the idea of having a writer walk in the room and say that, and really be acting from this position of being in demand and maybe not powerful, but just authoritative. I think that's a process, and that's a mindset shift that you have to make.
Totally.
So my next question, I really wanted to get into the hustle loop, because I think one of the things I love about the way you teach is that it's about how you're feeling as you're working and building your business. Like, why do all of this if you're going to be an overworked, angry person with no family in 5 years, which is the path I was on. So maybe what advice do you have for somebody who's stuck in the hustle loop, thinking, if I just work harder, then I'll get to this place where I can relax and have better clients and more time off?
Yeah, I guess the first thing is I would get real with myself. And it's one thing for me to tell you, hey, get real, but you need to actually show that, yeah, this is a lie. And just look back and say, okay, you've been doing this for how long and how well has that worked out for you? Okay, you've been hustling like crazy thinking that you're going to arrive. There's no arriving. So just be honest. If it hasn't happened yet, it's not going to happen today, and it's not going to happen in the future at this rate. That'd be the first one. The second thing is expect more. Condition yourself to expect more. You have to understand that wherever you are right now, whether you're starting, early stages, intermediate, there was always a past version of you who would have dreamt to have been where you are today. Okay, so we quickly lose perspective. Understand that 5 years, like, oh God, you're going to be here in 2022. What? Are you kidding me? That's awesome. I'm going to be going after this thing. And yes, you are. You would have been so grateful, so happy, but now you're in it and you don't really, think about it. So if that, I know in my life, and I think most of us can say the same thing, and that cycle has repeated itself over and over again, what makes you think that's not happening now? So in other words, that in a few years, you're going to look back at yourself, maybe put it another way, and realize how you shortchange yourself. You were telling yourself a story. I'm sure this has come up a couple of times already today. It's a story you're telling yourself that it was not serving you and it was keeping you stuck. So if you know that's happened in the past, what makes you think that it's not happening now? In 5 years, you're going to look back at today and realize it was happening. If that makes any sense. I'm really playing a back to the future game here. But if you know it's happened, in 5 years, you're going to look back today and realize how much you left on the table, how much you shortchanged yourself. Why not recognize it now and save yourself all the agony and start changing things? So yeah, it's just be your own hero. Be your own hero. Look at how far you've come and understand that this is a cycle that keeps repeating itself. Another thing would be to call it the pedestal annihilator technique. Most of the people achieving great success in this business, in any profession, are not any better than you. Okay. And I really mean that. I don't feel that I'm an amazing writer. I think I'm a pretty good writer, but pretty good with the right mindset, the right tools, the right systems, the right grit and strategies will get you very far. Okay. Don't put people on a pedestal. Just understand that they implemented certain strategies and ideas that are available to you as well. As long as you have a certain amount of skill, and this is why I love what you're doing, Sarah, because you're teaching people the skills they need to get into the dance. I always think of the high school dance. Once you're in the dance, you have a chance to dance with anybody there. The problem is a lot of people don't want to pay the ticket to get in the dance. So you have to pay the price. You have to learn the skills, the fundamentals. But once you're in there, understand that the right skills, strategies, Pickup lines are going to get you what you want. And then I guess a couple other things. One is I'll combine these last two, which is journaling. Get the head trash out. Give yourself some great prompts. And I'm going to give you, I know we only got a couple of minutes, but I did this class with my good friend and colleague, Susan Baracco, a few years ago. It was actually her class, and she has this process called the confidence cleanse. And I'm going to go through these very quickly because I know there's going to be a recording of this, right?
Yep.
Okay, so people can go back and write these down, but these are the prompts. What are my stories? What 3 or 4 things do I say to myself on a regular basis? That's number one. Number two, what do I get to do or not to do by using these old stories? So for each story listed in the previous question, write one way you're using it to stay put. Third question, what's the worst thing that could happen if I change? Create a list of possible outcomes if you were to think or act differently. Fourth, what must I replace these stories with? So for each story you listed, one way you must change it to reach a higher level. 5, what would my alter ego do? So your hero, your Batman, your Wonder Woman, how would they show up? What would they do? How can I embody that spirit? Next question, what story will I start with? Pick one you will work on changing this week. Got a whole bunch of them, or maybe 3 or 4. Let's just start with one. When will you start working on that story? And who can I tell and commit to? Who will check with me? An accountability buddy. Hey, this is what I'm committed to changing, and this is the first step that I'm taking. I just need to tell you so it's out there. Okay, so a lot of this is just that story you're telling yourself, the stories you're telling yourself, and acknowledging how they're limiting you and replacing them with a different story. You get to pick that. Nobody else can.
Yeah. I love that. I wonder, for someone who might not feel like they have any stories yet, like what if they can't recognize that a belief that they assume is true is actually a story? Do you have any kind of ways to ease into that first question, or like how to identify a story you're telling yourself?
Yeah, the best way is to look where there's fear. Follow the fear. What are you afraid of? What are you avoiding? Where are you finding resistance? Whether it's resistance when you sit down at the keyboard, resistance when you have to go prospect, resistance when you have to put that proposal together. Where is that? Look for resistance. Behind resistance, there's going to be fear and all these other things. And then create a prompt out of that. If it's still not clear, and then it's going to emerge. It can't hide. It can run, but it can't hide.
Yeah, that's perfect, because every behavior that's uncomfortable, there is a secret fear, even if we think we're just being sensible. So that's perfect. Just the perfect place to start. Awesome. Thank you so much for rocking our worlds for a half hour. And I've shared links to all of Ed's stuff, but just the resources and the free ebooks and the things that you've provided, I think, are enough to get anybody into a really successful writing career. And I think that's why just the generosity that you put in your stuff it still stands out years later. So thank you.
Listen, I'm being selfish because having to think through this stuff is very helpful for me. Again, nobody is immune. Nobody arrives. Okay. This is really good practice. These are great reminders. So just understand this is a lifelong journey. It's never going to stop. So, but thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Yeah. Thank you. That is all for today, but I just really appreciate you guys taking 2 hours to sit and think about your mindset, because this really could be the first day where you look at your problem the next time you see it, and you have that pause in that moment where you can decide to do something different. Instead of TikTok, I'm talking to myself, and social media, comparisonitis, all these things that are keeping us from what we want to do, that we can pause and choose something different and see where that takes us. So I'm very excited about that. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next month.
As a side note, if you enjoyed our conversation today, I want to encourage you to check out the B2B Writing Career Kickstarter. This is the all-in-one class that introduces you to B2B, helps you figure out your niche, and then a couple times a year, we actually get together and write your first clips together. If you'd like more information about that, just click the link in the course below or head to b2bwritinginstitute.com. Thanks for joining.